Moving in progress, indeed. Okay, well, it is Thursday somehow, June 17th, and we are here for another episode of Council Club. Thank you to everyone who is joining us today or watching later. That's good too. So there is not an agenda for next week because City Council is taking a week off, but we are going to just spend some time talking about what happened a couple days ago at Tuesday's council meeting. So first of all, did anybody go? I know Lori went because I saw her there and she spoke like a rock star. Thank you, Lori. We'll get to that. But if anybody else was watching, did you notice right away that the seating chart had changed again? So the petty baloney that we talked about last time, you know, when Brinker, Harding, and Amy Melton were upset that they did not win president or vice president, they wanted the seating chart shuffled around to have the most senior representatives toward the front. And so for one meeting, it was like that. And then when we walked into the chambers Tuesday, the first thing I said to Scott was, aha, they switched it. It's back to chronological order. So anyway, I kind of wonder what the backstory is on that. It kind of cracks me up. But anyway, so that was the first thing that we noticed is just, yeah, sure enough, back to the standard seating chart. And then there was also some interesting, if Manny comes in later, he might want to talk more about this, maybe not. But there was an interesting move, we kind of thought, by Juanita Johnson to lay over and attempted an approval for just some like building documents. I personally don't respect the developer, Ben Swan, but it did seem like it was kind of a petty thing that Juanita didn't want to approve. And it was really just some paperwork that needed to be approved. I think the planning department and public works had recommended some plans to allow for the doors of this new, well, it's not the new, it's the Carnation Ballroom on North 24th. It's been there forever. Bentley has purchased it and is redeveloping it. And Lavanya Goodwin from the North 24th BID was there speaking in support of it. I don't know exactly what's going to be happening in there, but they're getting it, you know, renovated and ready for tenants. And I guess this didn't have anything to do with business grant or anything like that. It was simply just getting some, they were actually trying to rent the property from the city so that the doors could swing out, and everybody was ready to approve it, but Juanita said, nope, I'm not going to approve it. I need more time to talk to the community. So that was just a little bit of a surprise. Does anybody know anything about that?
I was curious about that, and I even poked Brinker Harding to try and get him to tell me the backstory, and he was not interested in making any comment about that.
Yeah.
But you know, her objection had nothing to do with the matter that was before the council. That was the funny part about it, which is why I thought it was weird that the other members backed her up, because her objection didn't have anything to do with what they were voting on.
Right.
So you know, they just deferred to her because that's what they do. If somebody has an objection, they defer instead of actually dealing with the issue and smacking somebody down if they're in line. They won't do that. So
yeah, I mean, I do understand to a degree. It's in oh, here's Manny. We'll quiz him about it. I do understand, you know, it was in her district, and so I guess if she is the council representative where the issue is taking place, I suppose, you know, but it did seem silly to me and petty, and perhaps
who's the woman that's the co-developer?
Lavanya Goodwin, and she is I believe she's the chair of the BID. Manny just hopped on. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, she outright stated that Juanita was doing it for spite.
Yeah.
And, so that's what caught my attention.
There's a long history there. Yeah.
Interesting.
So we're just starting off talking about that, huh?
Well, first we pointed out that the seating chart was back to normal, and then this was kind of the next thing on our list. But yeah, perfect timing. Do you want to add anything to the discussion, Manny?
something to watch. I think just it'll be interesting to see how things like that unfold. It's, you know, benefit of the doubt is maybe it's like just a learning like how things operate on the council, but like I said, there's definitely background and history to that whole situation.
Yeah, it will be interesting to watch for sure.
And one thing I'm not sure if it was apparent on the TV was Ben Swan and Lavanya kept raising their hand, and it was really kind of like tense for a moment there at the meeting, because normally you can raise your hand and they're like, yeah, we don't, that's not how this works. But they did eventually come back up and have a brief discussion, but yeah, 2 more weeks. Laid over for 2 weeks.
And it's for something that planning and public works put forth to approve. Is just like, it'd be like if you're building a garage on your house and they just had to approve it, you know, it's essentially that minor. So yeah, it's kind of suspicious at the very least.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting how Lavanya specifically, and maybe you just said that, I'm sorry if I wasn't listening, but specifically asked for another council representative to be in that meeting because she did not want to be alone, not, you know, alone, but just like, I think for some more accountability, maybe. It was just an interesting little display early on in Council Member Johnson's career, like the second meeting. Anyway, anything else on that before we keep moving? All right. Another just item on our list is they kind of flip-flopped some stuff around timing wise, because when the mayor walked in, they of course catered to her and allowed her to talk about, I think it was item 49, which is her new hire, Tommy Warren, chief of staff, which actually this was something that, yeah, Manny brought up right when it came onto the agenda at first, like interesting how they're hiring him as an LLC instead of as a human, because he was the police chief years ago, was already collecting a hefty pension from the city of Omaha. So Stothert stood up and said, I'm already getting so many congratulatory messages and I can't wait to work with him. And I know you're all going to work with him, to the council, and talked about basically how, I mean, it's a, we all know it's already a done deal. But what else? Just kind of talked about maybe the 3% raise, how he wouldn't be getting any additional city benefits. Yeah, and then there was a few proponents, no opponents, except for that one email that we talked about last time. But it was kind of interesting to me that, no, I'm sorry, Deshaun Cunningham stood up as an opponent, but then stated that he didn't really have anything he was opposed to once they clarified how he was not going to be getting an additional set of benefits on top of his pension. So just.
Or that he wasn't going to be getting 2 paychecks, or was, yeah, two
salaries.
2 salaries. And I'm like, he's still getting paid twice from the city. So and the mayor even said, like, it's against the IRS to do what we're going to do. So we're going to do it a different way, which is just like blatant, just sort of
workaround.
Yeah, workaround.
Loopholes, figuring out how to make it work despite the intent of the law. You know, there's a lot of discussion about intent. And yeah, I don't know, just kind of interesting. Man, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, I was just gonna say, I know that like the main thing was around the pension because he's retired, right? So it's like, it'd be like going back to work while you're retired. Like you either give up your retirement or, you know.
Yeah, either you're retired or not retired, but
Yeah.
he is retired, but also.
Yeah, and since it's from the police force or from the police department, so he has a pension there, and I think that's the main reason, because he's still, it's not like he's just not working and it's a different job with a lot of different responsibilities. So I don't know, I see why they did it, but yeah, it's just, and it's not the first time, so it's not like there's no other precedents, but yeah. Well, they vote on it next time.
Yeah. Do you think that well, I guess the comment that Johnny just put in the chat, what do we know about his replacement at the Urban League? Anything yet?
I'm pretty sure, like I saw on Facebook that it was the at least the interim is going to be the was it the vice director? I don't know, it's called the assistant director.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. All righty then. I think we should get into park rules. That's what we were there for, pretty much. I want to high five you, Lori, for being there, and everybody who wrote in or testified. I was really proud of everybody's teamwork on that one, because I think that we saw that we made a difference because of our advocacy, which is my favorite thing. So Mode Shift Omaha did some good work too. You know, I was trying to get the word out through whatever channels I had my hands in, to encourage folks to email their council person to not approve the rules as proposed. So what they were trying to do is, you know, we did want to pat them on the back and say nice work on adjusting the attempted ban on e-bikes, because that was what we were battling last year. The whole point with that, well, there's a lot of points with that, but part of the thing that we've been all talking about for years, and especially a lot over the last year since this proposal came up last time, was bicycles on trails are used for transportation, and trails should be treated as transportation. We thought that we got that point across, but then they brought this next set of proposed rules, and it still included closing trails between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. So we wanted them to understand that trails should not be closed. We don't close streets. We should not close trails because they are parts of the transportation network. So gratefully, I was actually surprised. So the way that this worked, they pulled it off the consent agenda. I did finally hear back from Pete Festerson. Sure, you're not watching this, Pete Festerson, but if you are, thank you for finally responding to an email. I basically emailed him from my Mode Shift email, and I was like, please confirm that this is being pulled from the consent agenda so that we can talk about it. And he says, yes, it's being pulled from the consent agenda. And I was like, okay, cool. That counts as a reply. Nice work, you. So we were able to have a discussion. The parks director came up first and explained why he thought the rules were great. And then there were, Louise is not on here tonight, but Louise stood up as a proponent, not to make fun of you, Louise, if you're watching this, but I was hoping he'd be here today so I could talk to him about how, well, a lot of things, but he was talking about how he thought maybe instead of 11 o'clock, that maybe 10:30 would be the appropriate time to close the parks, which half hour, don't really know how that's gonna make much of a difference. But his big concern was drunk people. And he mentioned how he's been calling the police on people that were drunk in his, I know, Johnny, yes, same, as the face that I made, yeah. So anyway, not my favorite in a lot of regards, but that was one of the proponents. Another proponent was Julie Harris with Bike Walk Nebraska. And I like Julie's tactics sometimes because she'll come in as a proponent, be like, yes, I support this, but also this part sucks. So that's what she did in this case. And she specifically called out their lack of engagement, which I always appreciate because that's something that we all have been, you know, advocating for in different ways for a long time. And yeah, basically, she said, you know, we've been talking about this for a long time, since October. You know, I specifically said I want to be a stakeholder and engage in this process as we move forward. And has, you know, also she had brought up that trail hours should not be a thing because trails are like streets, transportation, blah, blah, blah. And then that was the end of the proponents. And then I spoke, Scott spoke, Lori spoke, Bill Carmichael, another Mode Shift member, new to Mode Shift, spoke, and then Kai also spoke. That was her first time speaking. I think it was Bill's first time speaking at City Hall as well. So that makes me super happy when we get new folks engaged and testifying at City Hall. So I think yay for Council Club. Also, we got a new Mode Shift member because of Council Club. Terry, if you're out there, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, good stuff's happening. I like the synergy of Mode Shift and Council Club and just like all of the faces that I see right now. Thank you for doing this thing. So basically what happened was we got through to them. I know Dave was emailing Harding a bunch, and just a lot of us were, and finally, despite Kalsevich, you know, his nice little presentation at the beginning saying how everything's fine and this is why we did it and just approve it. Brinker said that it needed to be laid over for a few weeks because gratefully a lot of different councilors spoke up and said that they understood our request to have the trails exempt from the park rules and the park closing times. So it's not a done deal yet. They'll vote on that in 2 weeks as well, but it does seem like hopefully we made a difference there. before I keep going on that, anybody have any comments?
Yeah, could I chime in for a sec?
Please.
I felt like it was a teeny tiny victory, and I, that was fun to celebrate. I thought when Matt and I will learn how to pronounce his last name. I don't have it mastered yet. Got up to rebut our comments.
Yeah.
Sounded like the adults in the Charlie Brown cartoons where it was like a lot of words, but no
Yes.
content.
Yep.
I kept calling it word salad.
And I was just like, Julie Harris was texting me, and I was like, it's a good thing I'm not in view of the camera, because I had an expression on my face like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because it literally had nothing to do with anything we had said. The other thing that surprised me is that I had emailed Danny Begley before the, several days before the meeting. He didn't respond. Okay, he's new. I'm not going to complain too much about that yet. But then when I introduced myself, I specifically said I live in District 3 and looked straight at him. And after the meeting, he literally walked right past me and didn't introduce himself. And I'm thinking, what kind of politician passes up the opportunity to meet with a constituent when when it was just like so clear? I was right there. There's no way he didn't see me. But I will say that I on Dave's recommendation, thank you, Dave, to email, a message of thanks for laying it over or whatever, which I don't typically do, but I thought, oh, what the hell? He's new. I want him to know that I'm paying attention. So I did. And he responded today and said, thank you for being there. Appreciate your involvement. And so it's like, okay, I'm not going to completely write him off yet. So that's what I wanted to share with this group. And thanks again for doing this, because it's a good way to inspire people to get a little more involved, I think.
Cool. Good. Yes. Awesome. Thank you for being involved. It really only works when, folks show up. Dave, did you just raise your hand?
Yes. Along the lines of what Lori's talking about, I started emailing Brinker Harding a few weeks ago, and he's gone from blowing me off for an entire week to responding within a matter of hours to my emails. And I think that's interesting. And I think his taking the lead on laying it over was interesting. I didn't expect any of that stuff from him.
Neither
at all.
did I. Yeah.
Based on what I know about his political history. But, that was interesting. And then the other thing is, I really became involved with parks stuff back in the 80s and 90s when Jerry Parks and Larry Foster were running stuff, and they were so deeply engaged with the public. They had a Parks Advisory Council. They didn't do anything about the parks without running it past the Citizen Advisory Council first. And they were really instrumental in getting the paved trail system initiated and then later expanded. And did all kinds of other cool stuff in the parks. But again, this new guy doesn't seem to me to be any more interested in citizen input than the mayor, which I think may be why he was hired. So,
well, he did talk to people after the meeting, and he seemed very willing to engage, from my kind of outsider perspective, which I was pleased to see. I mean, it was kind of to me, it seemed like a fairly strong contrast that, in his rebuttal where he was like, and then after the meeting, he and Sarah were having this super pleasant conversation and scheduled it to, said, let's get together next week and talk about this further.
Yeah, I was, that was my first time. What I thought was funny is he and I have been emailing So I definitely didn't need his business card, but he beelined for me right after he was done and like kind of aggressively gave me his card. And I was like, hi, Matt. Yeah, remember how we've been emailing? But okay, I got your card now. And then he went out and I'd also been leading up to that, a journalist from KMTV reached out, Jessica Edson, whatever. And she was like, are you going to be there? I want to talk to you afterwards. So I was getting ready to go out there and talk with her. He was also being interviewed. And then I guess I was after I got interviewed, then I was talking with Matt and I said, hey, welcome to Omaha, you know, because he's new to town. He moved here from Des Moines, which Des Moines has a decent trail system. So maybe he understands that we could, you know, we could move a little closer in that direction. But I just said, you know, I don't know what all you have or have not heard about Mode Shift Omaha, but we are really interested in working with the city, not against the city, because I know that the mayor doesn't always think that we want to work with the city, but that's only because she never allows us to. So I think that hopefully, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic, I'll say. It does feel like a tiny win, and I did, yeah, also write back and say thank you for voting to lay it over. Everybody echoed, yes, makes sense. Vinny Palermo even specifically said, even if there's one person that is using the trail, I think we should keep it open. You know, I brought up the point that Elmwood Park Road, you know, if you're studying late at the library, you're a UNO student on North Campus at the library and you're going back to your dorm on the South Campus, if you're not in a car, does that make it illegal? Like, it's just so silly, you know? So hopefully we made it seem silly enough that they will understand our point. And the Matt guy also, after the meeting, when we were talking in the lobby, he was like, I liked your idea of, you know, that at your own risk, like the sledding. Cause I even, you know, while I was speaking against it, I brought my little printout of how the proposal worked. And I just added in my own exemption, trails as transportation. And then I underlined the part from the sledding that's at your own risk. And like, why can't you just say that trails are at your own risk? Cause I know it's always, they're worried about being sued for something. So it's like, figure out what type of wording you need it to be, but understand that trails are transportation. Let us know. And yeah, he said, I'm looking forward to working with your group and we'll get it figured out. It shouldn't be that difficult. So again, it's not a done deal, but it seemed great. You know, at least they didn't approve it as is and not even pull it off the consent agenda. So I think it was a tiny win. And as Dave said, I'm surprised that Brinker was the one that moved for the layover and Melton seconded it. So that was kind of cool. Oh, one other thing, and then Dave, I think you're raising your hand, but I did factor in to my testimony a little bit of what I got from Dr. Feichtinger, Erin on Twitter. I don't know if y'all follow her, but she's always just awesome. She was tweeting from pre-council, and so I kind of knew some of what they were thinking there, and so I was able to rope it into my testimony, which I think was kind of helpful.
And they talked about the survey and how
yeah.
99% of the people that took the survey said that they use the trails for recreation and they did not use it for transportation. And if anyone took that survey, the word transportation was not in the survey. And so when he got back up, when Kalsevich got back up to talk about the survey results, he said that only 3% chose the commuting option. It was either recreation or commuting. And we were talking how you don't commute to the grocery store, you don't commute to church, you don't commute to the bar. You know, it's just like, you know, there's so many things like that. It's not just commuting or transportation or recreation. So that was, yeah, another.
And we also pointed out biases in surveys. Like, I mean, the person who is probably going to be most greatly affected by this policy they don't maybe have the time, maybe they don't have the internet. Like, you know, maybe they are working 3 jobs and they can't, you know, spare the time to come to council to talk about it, let alone take a survey. But anyway, Dave, what were you gonna say?
The Parks Department has always considered riding on the trails an at your own risk activity. And we've had specific discussions about this in the past, particularly about the failure of the Parks Department to maintain the trails after heavy rains and you get the mudslides on the trail. People ride their bikes, they fall down and break body parts. And this has happened to scores of people over the history of the trail. And the city has no interest in either correcting the problem by re-engineering the bridges or by maintaining them regularly after the heavy rain. And the Parks Department's position specifically for Brook Bench about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I had a conversation with him. If you don't feel it's safe to ride on the trails, stay home. Okay, that was the Parks Department's attitude while he was in charge. So, it's not a big leap from that to saying if you ride at night, maybe you're at a higher risk than you are if you ride in the daytime. But the Parks Department would naturally consider that you were doing that at your own risk. So,
Interesting.
yeah, they have a history of taking that position. So if that's useful to you in your negotiations.
Yeah. What this Matt guy said was, well, what I always say is like, fun is dangerous. So we just have to figure out a way to word it so that the lawyers are happy. And I was like, okay, great. That's glad you said that. It's so funny. You were just typing that as I was thinking. The other thing that, when I talk with him, and I don't know if it'll be an in-person meeting or if we'll review it via email or whatever now, because he made it sound like it would be pretty simple. And I tried to make it sound like this should just be easy, right? Like just add this exemption. But the other thing that I'm going to bring up, since he had stated goals of safety, community engagement, and equity, the safety piece, we have had a couple folks over the years reach out about how dangerous underneath 72nd Street is on the Keystone Trail. It's a blind corner. 72nd, it's just a little bit north of Pacific, where the Keystone kind of by the Kohl's parking lot, kind of. No, it's by the furniture market, kind of, yeah, where it goes under 72nd. Anyways, there's a blind corner, and in the past, people have asked for a mirror there, but nobody by the Wingstop. Yes, indeed. There has not been really any traction on getting a mirror installed, and so
some citizens have talked about taking it into their own hands and just doing a DIY mirror, seeing if it'll get taken down.
There's been spray painted like separation lines, because the thing that's dangerous, I don't know who would have done that, but the thing that's dangerous is when you go under and if you're not staying to the right, it could be a total head-on collision. So that's something that I'm going to bring up to Matt when we're talking about safety as well.
And also is that what you're talking about? It's under the bridge. So if you did have a collision, you just like tumble down into the creek.
Which has happened.
Over rocks and things like that.
And I think I had a customer. Yeah, I've heard of a lot of bad situations because of that blind spot. So if they're going to act like they care about safety, then like maybe get real about it and do some improvements.
And I think Juanita was asking again about safety, and this was brought up on Twitter in one of the comments about, is there any studies that show an increase in muggings or violence or crime on these 24-hour trails? And I don't know if he said he was going to try and do a study or get the data by then.
Yeah, Juanita was telling him that before she could vote on it, she needed more information around the correlation between trail open hours and crime. So
yeah, weirdly, it sounded like she was trying to link the recent uptick in, she didn't say the word gun, but she said violence in her district to potentially parks and trails being open, which is like, you're making a leap that, makes no sense to me as, an observer, disinterested observer, but.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what all the crime is coming from, is people being like, hey, I'm gonna go out to the trail and shoot somebody.
Those darn trails.
Yeah.
That's
actually, the inverse.
Weird.
The inverse is actually more true. Like with extended hours, you'd probably have to like compare like per hour, like violence on trails, which is going to be like almost impossible type of number to find, especially connected to like Omaha specifically. But generally, like, if you have trails and such like that, violence goes down in those areas because there are people there,
More eyes. Yeah, exactly. If you activate, it's like what we talk about a lot of times in Benson, is like, oh, we don't need more cops in the alleyways. We need more pedestrian activity so that when there's more eyes in the alleyways, it's safer for everybody. So anyway, if anyone does happen to have any trail data around safety and hours of operation, I mean, that is something specifically that Juanita said she's going to have to see before she can approve it, so.
And then another thing that we found out after the meeting was Council Bluffs, so the Riverfront Trail in Council Bluffs, we believe it's open 24 hours a day. And so is the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge. But if you were to ride from Council Bluffs, like we have in the past from Stir Concert Cove, if you can ride up to the point, you can ride up to the Bob Carey Bridge, but once you hit the Riverfront Trail, then that park closes at 11 o'clock. So you literally can't get on to the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge from the Omaha side. There's so many contradictions, but that was just an interesting one. And he even said about how some trails, go into Papillion or Ralston, and how they need to be consistent. It's just like, it doesn't even know what time it is. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and that's I think a point you raised when I watched it was, are you gonna have police just like patrolling the trails, and like how are you gonna enforce this? And then it's not for what it's meant, what they're saying is for. It has nothing to do with safety or anything like that. They just don't. The reason why it's parks and trails is probably because they just included trails, but it's because of the parks. They don't. It's about homeless people. I'm telling you, like they probably didn't bring it up explicitly, but that's what it's about. It has nothing. I mean, what else could it be about? Safety? Like, I mean, when's the last time you heard that there's been problems in parks or trails at any time? Like, besides like the random sporadic type of thing. Where's this pervasive problem that I'm hearing about in the news,
Right.
So.
Well, Luis Jimenez saw 2 drunk people at 10:30 at night.
Yeah, he was probably one of them. Well, actually, I forgot we were recording, so take that out.
We joke, we kid.
We brought that up at the beginning before you joined us, Manny, how Louise thought that by changing the park hours from closing at 11 to closing at 10:30, that would really solve that problem.
But no, and Kai, actually, that's when her testimony was about,
Yeah.
was saying that they need to consider the unhoused people.
Yeah, and as Manny and I mean, a lot of us, like, you can't just, this is another slapping a Band-Aid on a problem that is not how you fix the problem. So we could, do a little bit better job about getting real about taking care of our neighbors if we wanted to.
But it's also a solution looking for a problem. I mean, as Manny said, who's heard of that many problems on the trails at night?
Right.
Or even in the parks, really. This is like a rule that they want to try to enforce that, doesn't have a problem necessarily connected to it.
Yeah. And his excuse, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's like the panhandling ordinance thing where they were like, it's for their own safety. And I'm like, homeless people aren't really getting hit by cars on the medians. It's about getting them out of sight. Like,
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, Omaha.
Well, there really wasn't that much else on the agenda or that happened. It was a pretty short meeting, only an hour-ish.
I feel like the majority of it was the parks discussion, which I was happy about because I wanted it to be loud and clear that like that was not going to be an okay.
And like what Dave said, we were surprised that Brinker was the one that moved to layover, and then Melton seconded it. And we're like, wow, they agree with us. It's an unusual company, but we'll take it. And then we noticed, so Jessica Edson from KM TV did a story on it. She was there. Anton Johnson, he's a new intern for the Reader and UNO Gateway. He was there, and he was live tweeting it. So if you're looking to follow along on Twitter, he's a new one. And then Reese was there from the Omaha World Herald, but they did not do a story on it. So way to go, World Herald. And then they actually did do a story. The World Herald did do a story, somewhat related about the new recycling drop-off location in Midtown that's opening, I think, on Monday. We've been without a recycling drop-off location in Midtown for 6 months, since November, when they got rid of the 75th and Corby location.
Blackstone TIFF.
Yeah.
Dave, I know you emailed me saying you're paying more attention to TIFF these days, which I like to hear. I mean,
I could become a TIFF geek.
Good. That's what we're here for. I think that well, first of all, when you're calling the like hippest new neighborhood that's making all these fancy hotels and like what, that's not blighted in my opinion. And again, it kind of reminds me a little bit with the contract with Tommy Warren as far as like impact and intent. It's like, okay, the intent of TIF was to help build up truly blighted areas of town, not just like a developer says, oh, I want to be blighted, pick me to be blighted, and then they get the money. So I don't know. Anyway, nerd out about
Well,
TIF.
the point of it is for the property owner to get relief from paying property taxes.
Yep.
Okay, so my new interest in this is that if it's a very wealthy property owner or group of people or developer or whatever that already have a bunch of money and probably could pay the property taxes, especially if they're getting income from the property as we go into the future that they could use to pay the property taxes. Why do we want to give them a break so that they don't have to pay property taxes that they could easily afford to pay? Because what happens is you still have to run the city, county, state, whatever. And if you're not collecting taxes from rich people, then you're collecting tax. You're not collecting taxes from poor people because they don't have any money to pay taxes. So you're collecting those taxes from the middle class, and you're increasing the burden on what we call the working people of Omaha, Douglas County, and Nebraska, just to give these guys a break that they don't really need.
We could include conditions in that TIF funding that we're not doing right now. We could do things like include provisions for hiring businesses that are owned by minorities as contractors. We could include provisions that ensure some measure of affordable housing in the development. I mean, there are things that we could be doing that other cities do that we are not doing.
And it just got reviewed by the state to maybe make some amendments to how it's going. Does anyone know what the latest is with the revision?
I know you're right, but I don't know what that looks like.
And to Dave's comment, I mean, every time, well, not every time, but one of the key words in TIF is but for. And if they did not get the tax break, but they would not be able to do the project. And we know that's not true because, well, when they did the Crossroads TIF, they'd already started the construction. The buildings were being knocked down. And so to say that they can't afford to do the project, they replied with, oh, they were gambling. They were taking a risk. But they definitely can afford the taxes.
Speaking of gambling, it'll be interesting to watch when the casino TIF comes up. That's something that I think we should all really start thinking about now and what we want our testimony against that one to look like.
Did you all see Lance Morgan's op-ed in the World Herald a few days ago? He specifically addressed that point. And it was kind of interesting because basically he said, yeah, I've never been involved in a project where I faced opposition like this before, and it's because it's a casino and people are trotting out these basically discriminatory tropes about greedy Indians and stuff like that. But then he justified qualifying for TIF because of the essentially the public infrastructure work that will be done, in terms of sewer, street redesign, in and around the project. So I think it's probably worthwhile to, look at his piece.
I just popped it in the chat. Yeah, no, that is good to collect all the information out there before we put anything together. But I just think it's another example of like how whenever you decide you want, I don't know. I just think TIF in general is abused left and right. And I think everyone does it in their own special way. And this is just like another special way to not use TIF how I think it was intended to be used. But yeah, that'll be interesting if I say something. Okay. Anything else about TIF, or David, you want to talk about pre-council?
So I did not know there was such a thing as pre-council.
Yeah.
So I want to know what it is, and if is it like a closed meeting, or can the public attend?
It is open.
Yeah.
It is wide open, but it's on Tuesday at 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's like they announce it. It's like on the last page of the city council agenda, and they announce the pre-council meeting. And I love that Aaron was live tweeting from the pre-council meeting, which I too did not realize was open, but it is. And you know, the thing that's interesting is that you get some insight into some of the questions that council members may have, and also how department heads may or may not respond to those particular questions. It seems like it happens in a very small, hot room. So
Yeah.
not like making it necessarily accessible to public view, but it is an open meeting.
I think we got lucky because the Douglas County Commissioners, they start at 9. It was only a 2-hour meeting, so they were done maybe by 11ish or so. And so I think Aaron was down there for the Douglas County and then just went into the pre-council meeting. So I don't, sometimes Douglas County goes right up until like 1:30. But yeah, we might need to start attending those, especially on, if we would have known that they would, yeah, we should have attended this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you could spend all day Tuesdays at City Hall.
We're gonna have a pre-council club.
Yeah.
I think Aaron does spend every Tuesday down there all day long.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we could have
Most
lunch.
of us can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Cool. All right. Anything else? I guess we had a couple non-city council related things to just talk about. The other thing that's going on tonight, which I don't know if they voted already or not. I don't know what time the vote happens, but the learning community is voting tonight on whether or not to allow optional, not critical race theory, but optional anti-racism education. And there were protesters that are thinking that that's awful and should not be allowed, and it's critical race theory and it's dividing our country. And then there's other people who are like, oh, information and education is good, and in order to move forward as a country and feel like we can be united at some point, we have to acknowledge where we've come from. I don't know. I just think this country is chaos and trash, and I'm sad about it. And everything's hot and on fire, and I read too much Twitter before I went to bed last night. I was like, everything's terrible and depressing, and what are we doing? Experts from the Buffett Early Education Center testifying to the value of anti-race teaching for pre-K. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if they voted or not. I know that it was similar to city council in that you have like 3 minutes if you wanted to testify one way or the other. I think there was a protest and a counter protest. So I don't know if anybody's been following that this evening at all, but that's something I'm kind of interested in seeing how that plays out. And then Juneteenth is a federal holiday, and that is exciting and important. And there is a Juneteenth celebration this weekend, which is going to be good on North 24th Street. And then tomorrow at 11:30, I put this in the chat earlier, there's a Facebook event with more details, but basically at the courthouse tomorrow at 11:30, there's going to be an event honoring Will Brown. There's going to be a historical marker placed at 11:30 at the courthouse, talking about our past, which we need to do. So that there's just a whole lot of stuff going on. Yes. Oh, big box liquor stores in my part of town, says Dave. How many? A lot of them. I actually went yesterday to, what was it even called? Beer, spirits, liquors, and more, because I've been drinking a lot of non-alcoholic beer lately, because during the campaign, I like kind of stopped drinking because you have to be on 24/7. And then I realized it also like makes my hot flashes worse. So anyway, I've been drinking non-alcoholic beer lately, and they've got a great selection. And that guy stood up at city council and was like, don't let the Hy-Vee have a 20,000 foot warehouse with liquor because I just opened my business and I'm a family business and you should say no. And they're like, no, we're not going to say no because we said yes to that guy. So we're going to say yes to you, or vice versa. But
They had it, that was rule 7. They had to, something about they had to suspend rule 7, which I think is if there's another liquor license within 500 feet. That's what I believe that's what rule 7 was. And there ended up being like 4 within 500 feet. So the answer, I believe, is 4 big box liquor stores, Dave.
Well, the comment from Brinker that I didn't appreciate was that we can't give preference to one business over another just because you're a local guy. And I thought, well, of course you can. I mean, that's one of the purposes of having zoning. It's one of the purposes of having a planning department. It's one of the purposes of having a city council, so that you can support people who live in your community that have businesses. And not only that, every time you bring in another out-of-town major player in any kind of business venture, all that money gets sucked out of the Omaha economy and goes to Des Moines or Bentonville, Arkansas, or wherever the heck, and it doesn't recirculate in our economy. The local guy who has a liquor store, that money stays in town and it recirculates and it makes everything better. So one of the purposes of having a government is to facilitate that process. So for you to say, hey, you know, one business is the same as another, and no, they're not. The city benefits from having local businesses supported. So that kind of pissed me off.
yeah, no, I also heard that. And it sounds like Lori was also aware that that sounded not really accurate, I guess. All right. What else?
That's it.
No council meeting for 2 weeks, right?
Correct. Yes. This coming Tuesday, there is no meeting. But this coming Thursday, we'll still have a meeting because we won't have anything to talk about. Well, I'm sure we'll have shit to talk about from this last week, but we will have an agenda to look forward to for the 22nd is the next time. Or I'm sorry, they're not having a meeting on the 22nd. They are on the 29th. We will meet again on the 24th.
And do we think it's important to contact people about the trails?
I have been posting on Mode Shift still to thank your city councilor for voting to lay it over so that we can get it rewritten in a proper way to show that trails are transportation. So, I mean, I think Dave's point is interesting that like, if you start emailing your council person regularly, maybe they will start getting back to you more expediently, or maybe that's a fluke. I think it's funny. Also feel free to BCC me on emails. That happens a lot when folks from, you know, all over are emailing their city council person, just because I always am interested in conversations like that. Yeah.
I'll just, one more thing on the trails is as far as safety at night and things like that. I think, you know, it's kind of like all safety is like, if there's going to be crime and violence, it's not caused by the trails. You know, it's the root causes. So if any council people are slinging that jargon around and then they turn around and use it, the opposite of it for the trails, which I might send you an email about here, Sarah.
Can't wait.
It might be handy. So
Great. Yeah, no, that's good to be. I'm also trying to just think of, you know, any other type of rebuttal that we might need to have like ready. Like, I don't know what else they're going to come up with, but I guess one question. So the mayor appoints department directors, right? Did she hired this guy? I assume, just like the rest of the department heads. Okay. Sounds like yes.
Don't you remember they had to approve
some relocation or
$8,000?
something?
Yeah, it was a weird. The city, yeah, they had to approve for his relocation. So yeah,
The dogs are mad about it.
I think he was hired, not appointed. Is there a difference?
I don't really know how that process works, but I'm sure she has the last say on it. But hopefully it'll be good. I am determined to make a friend out of him and help him understand that we can work together to make this place that is, like, you know, going to be accommodating for everyone and still not get them sued or increase crime. But I think I did kind of piss him off because I was like, oh, well, if you're worried about getting, because one of his, in one of the email exchanges, he was like, well, it gets dark and, we don't want anyone out there in the dark. And I was like, okay, well, in the winter, it gets dark at 5 o'clock. So then shouldn't we close them at 5 o'clock and not 11 o'clock? So I maybe it was a little too snippy at the get-go, but I'm thinking that, I'll follow up with him next week.
Let's just close the sidewalks and have a curfew at 5 o'clock everywhere in the city. That's the solution to all of our problems.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Be
So-
careful what you ask for.
Oh, I know, that's the truth. Ugh, wild times. All right, cool. Well, I think we're gonna call it. I'm gonna hit stop recording so we can see. If you're not joining us live, there's a lot of juicy stuff that happens after we hit recording. That's not true, but I'm gonna hit stop.